And welcome back to the Paisan podcast. Welcome back, Dante the
Paisan
Plus.
Sports Podcast. I don't
What
know
did
why
I
you
say?
sports. You said the
What did I say?
Paisan Podcast. I like
Oh
that,
yeah,
but you got to add
it's
the sports in there, so there's some
it's been a
clarity. Even
long
though we
day.
got our
It's
logo
been a
down at the
long
bottom
Easter.
border right here.
Yeah, welcome back to the Paisan Sports podcast. Dante the Plasdo, joined as always by Zach Deal.
Yes, sir.
So, few things to talk about today. To as recent as today, of course the Phillies series against the Braves, finally winning the final game of the series. Haason Reddick traded from the Philadelphia Eagles to the New York Jets, and the Sixers get a win on the road against the Toronto Raptors. So let's kick it off by talking about this win against the Raptors.
Yeah, well, the Sixers won without Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey, so that's always a plus. They're trying to
That's a
uh,
big plus.
stay afloat in this playoff race and somehow find their way out of that play-in series, which kind of looks like it's going to be tough with the injuries that they're going to have down the stretch. Joel, we don't know exactly when he's going to be coming back, but it seems like he's ramping up. He's practicing with live players now, so that's definitely a plus. The conditioning is always going to be an issue. That's just an issue, even with not like the biggest issue in the world with Joel, just his style of play. He's got to be very conditioned to, go on a playoff stretch where he's going to be playing 38 to 40 minutes a game. So,
Yeah, I wonder if when the playoffs first start, if they do have him playing that many minutes, maybe they ease him in with like 30 the first couple games or so. But let's talk about the game itself because I feel like from the game itself there's a lot to talk about. One of them being a franchise record has been broken tonight. 24 threes hit in the game. And not only that, I believe it was five different Sixers with at least three, and two different Sixers with six, which is just nuts.
well, their roster is pretty much littered with 3-point shooters. That's why
Yeah,
people
it's a
do give
small
them a
lineup.
chance when Joel Embiid comes back because they have a lot of guys that can shoot the ball from three. Even Nico Batum had a really good game today. So, when you get a cast of guys where there's not one direct guy that's going to have the ball in his hands the entire time, you see what happens. And today they were able to shoot the long ball. Nick Nurse going back to Toronto where he used to coach and won a championship. And yeah, it was definitely a really good outing for a Sixers team that was minus Joel Embiid and Tyrese Maxey tonight.
And on the road, nonetheless, as well.
Yeah, so that's always a plus. Like we said, they got to stay afloat for the standings. If we look at the current standings right now, let's see where we're sitting at and what the other people vying around us. The Sixers are the 8 seed. They are 18 and a half games back from Boston, who nobody's most likely going to catch. They have an 11-point lead at the top of the and the best record in the entire NBA. Um, yeah, it's gonna come down to these last 7 games down the stretch to see if the Sixers can play themselves out of the play-in tournament. But you said ease and Joel Embiid into minutes. Are they gonna have the leadway to even do that? Because when you're playing in the play-in tournament, you're either in or you're out if you win or
I
you
mean,
lose.
but here's the thing. Here's the thing: is you've seen how good this team looked in the regular season with Joel Embiid. Um, And here's the thing: when they had Embiid in the regular season and they were playing bottom tier playoff teams, 8 seeds, 9 seeds, 7 seeds, what have you, Embiid wouldn't even end up playing the fourth quarter in those games. It would just be a blowout. So, I doubt even if they intend on giving him 38, 40 minutes and playing games, I doubt he's even going to have to do that. I think they're just going to walk the floor with whoever they encounter in the playing games because they're just that much better with Joel Embiid on the court. So I don't really
Even
think
versus a team like Miami, because I don't think that's the case with Miami. I think they just play down to their competition when it
it's
matters most. We've seen the past couple years how far they've gotten with Jimmy Butler leading the
Yeah,
way.
I guess Miami is a bit of a worry, but if it's any other team, I'm not really worried about it. More on what I wanted to talk about with tonight's game, though, is how key of a signing Kelly Oubre has ended up being, right? I mean, this is a guy that they signed last minute before the season started at the veteran minimum. And my God, without Joel Embiid, like the way this team has been without Joel Embiid, as bad as they've looked, I mean, without Kelly Oubre, things would be so much worse. He ever
He
since
always
Embiid.
seems to be the guy that steps up to when there has been the cases that Tyrese Maxey misses games, or even with during the stretch with Joel Embiid. The only thing with him is he gets really hot or cold. Like there's certain nights where he can have 5 to 7 points, and he's shooting like 3 of 12 from the floor. But when he's on, he gets really hot, and that lefty stroke is really nice. So I mean,
Well, yeah, that's the thing. It's he can be hot. He's more hot than he is cold. However, like okay, if I'm looking at his 9 most recent games here, right? He had 32 points tonight on 10 of 22 shooting. Against the Cavs, bad night as you're referring to. He only had 4 points on 2 of 11 shooting. Before that, he had 17 points. Game before that, he had 12. Before that, he had 19. Before that, he had 18, 22, 22, and then back to 9. So it's like out of every 10 games, 8 of those are pretty solid. And maybe about 5 of those, he's given you at least 20 points. I think that those previous 10 games are very reflective on, probably the 10 games before that and before that. I think he's like, there's been, ever since Embiid's been out, there's been Maxey, who's been by far the number one option, by far their biggest producer in terms of points. But then Kelly Oubre has been right behind him. And so to have that second option has been so key, because if Kelly Oubre was not here, there's not a single player on this roster that would be the surefire second option behind Tyrese Maxey. And there
yeah, well,
wouldn't be a
Tobias
guy
tries
like.
to be, but Tobias is also kind of somebody that gets streaky as well as that. So I don't think it's a lack of roles and Nick Nurse not being communicative with what he wants players to do. I just think it's kind of the offense runs a lot through Tyrese Maxey and Joel Embiid when they're healthy. So it's hard for guys to get shots and get in rhythm if they're not getting opportunities. But as we know in the playoffs, it's by any means, and there's going to be a lot of double teams for Joel Embiid when he does come back, just to put pressure on him and try and wear him down and wear him out. So those guys are going to have to step up and play and
Well,
be closer to their peaks than to their lowlights.
the one thing I will say at this point in Tobias Harris's career, I think he's better as a complementary piece to Joel Embiid than a guy who will look to create his own shot and get you a lot of buckets.
I just don't want to live
Because
and die by the three when it comes playoff time. Like it's either Joel posting up or living and dying by the three. You still got to be able to drive the basketball, and I think the only one that consistently does that is Tyrese Maxey. But we also haven't talked about how Joel hasn't played with his new cast of characters, because I actually do like the way that the offense
yeah, I
runs
mean,
through
we got
Kyle
Buddy
Lowry.
Hield now, we got Cameron Payne, we got
Buddy
Kyle
Hield's definitely
Lowry.
dropped off a lot since the beginning of the trade when he
Yeah,
first got here, but I
when
think
we
there's a
first
lot of new
brought him
guys
here.
trying to get adjusted to each other, and like I said, I really like how the offense flows through Kyle Lowry when he's running point.
Yeah, when Buddy Hield first got here, I mean, he was lighting it up. And he hasn't been doing that since, and that's fine. But when Embiid gets back on the court, you know, and you have Buddy Hield out there on the perimeter, I mean, that is going to work so well with Joel Embiid's game.
And
And
when
you
you
got
get Joel back, you can have a lineup that may be able to feature Buddy Hield, um, Kelly Oubre, Tyrese Maxey, and Tobias Harris, and you have 5 guys who can shoot the three because Joel can do it too when he's left open. But Joel can pass out of the post, and that might be their best offensive lineup that they go to in the playoffs during stretches. I don't know how great that will be defensively because none of those guys besides Joel are superb defensively, but offensively, that's a lineup that
well,
can
you do
really
have
score.
you do have Nico Batum, who's very very good on the defensive end and can also shoot the three sometimes. I don't know when they expect to get Robert Covington back, but they certainly miss his
I'm not really
defense.
expecting him to come back, honestly, since how long this injury's been, unless they're completely saving him and shelving him for the playoffs, which I feel like there would be some ramp up period at the end of the regular season. But if they get him back with Joel, then that's definitely an added plus. But they got to figure out how many guys are going to be in this rotation come playoff time,
Well, I think
because
as of right
it's one
now,
game do or die when we
I
get to
think
this
as of
playing
right
series.
now, this is just too small of a lineup, right? Tonight you saw the Sixers lineup when they're doing what they do best, which is shooting the three. They're a small 3-point shooting lineup. So when you take what they're able to do at their strength, but then their weakness is obviously size, but then you bring back Joel Embiid, then you're killing that weakness. You're adding strength with Joel Embiid, and then you still have the strength of all the 3-point shooting. And then if you could also add back Robert Covington as well, then you definitely get rid of that lack of size issue, and you still have all the 3-point shooting. You still have Joel Embiid. So I do like the way this team can look once Embiid comes back and it's playoff time.
Yeah, I mean, if Paul Reed is not thrust into playing like a predominant center role where he has to play high minutes because Joel can't go a certain amount of time, then I do like their chances. Mo Bamba has been playing decent recently as well. That's why I keep bringing up all these guys that we mentioned, and not too many teams go like 10 to 12 deep in the playoffs. So that's why I'm interested to see what Nick Nurse will roll out in the playoffs scenario wise to certain situations, because certain situations they need more defense out on the court, and perimeter defense I think is still, like we talked about in the last podcast, something that they're lacking. So we're gonna have to see what Nick Nurse comes up with, but they definitely have a lot of utility players that can play a certain role for when Joel does come back. But like we already mentioned during this podcast, Joel hasn't played with a lot of these players on the roster. There's been a lot of roster turnover since Joel's even
Yeah.
played a last game, so there's going to be some familiarity issues, but practicing with those guys too should help. So he has some familiarity, but putting it into a live game is going to be a different story. So I'm just excited to see. And my hopes and aspirations for the Philadelphia 76ers this season completely lies on when Joel Embiid will come back. And I think a lot of people reasonably believe the same thing.
Yeah, I mean, listen, there's an entire city whose collective mental health relies on the physical health of a 7'2" Cameroonian man. And we gotta see what he's gonna do. He's gonna come back out there. And it will be, to your point, it will be very interesting to see what Nick Nurse is gonna do with, because he just has a plethora of different options to go to in the playoffs. So it's gonna be interesting to see who goes with. And in terms of Mo Bamba, I think all Mo Bamba really needed was to just get a consistent, solid amount of minutes, because he has been looking very good lately. But time to
He
move
actually does
on.
a lot of like the traditional center roles, and he can step out and shoot the three,
He's been
catches
really
alley
good
oops,
in the pick and roll.
plays good defensively. He's got a huge wingspan, obviously one of the biggest in NBA history, and yeah,
Yeah, and he's been really good in the pick and roll, catching those lob passes. He's looked good, but we do have to move on now to one of the uh, probably the worst piece of news from the weekend, which is the Eagles have traded Haason Reddick to the New York Jets for a conditional 2026 third round pick that could become a 2026 second round pick if Haason Reddick both plays 67% of the snaps for the season and records 10 sacks. So probably a third round pick. Not to say he
well, I'll
can't
tell you
get
one
10
thing, he's playing
sacks,
for a
but
contract. He's playing for a
well,
contract
it's
question.
not the sacks that I'm worried about. It's the 67% of snaps, because New York also likes to rotate guys in and out. So I'm worried about the snap count, not the sack amount. But yeah, basically Hassan Reddick traded to the Jets for a 2026 third round pick. Not great.
Yeah, I'm not too pleased with that. And theoretically, if you look at it, they pretty much got rid of Haason Reddick for Bryce Huff, and it was to the same teams that got on that part of the trade. Third round pick is actually a decent return because it's still a day two pick, but not for the level of player that Haason Reddick
No,
is. Doesn't really free up
absolutely
that
not.
much cap this year. It frees up like 1 million this year, but it frees up some money next year. But they could have also gave him a contract extension that would have freed up money this season if he would have stayed with the Philadelphia Eagles. You can look at it that like they gave up Haason Reddick for Bryce Huff or for Josh Sweat, and I do not like the rotation at all. I'm still there's not too much I have seen from Nolan Smith either way to determine if he's ready to go or not, but I don't think he's gonna go from where he was last season to the level of play that we got from Haason Reddick when he was a Philadelphia
Yeah,
Eagle.
no, I don't
And
think
I just
Nolan's
don't think anybody at this rotation can reach the peak of what we saw from Haason Reddick, especially the year that they went to the Super Bowl.
Yeah, I don't think I agree with you on that, that nobody on that defensive line is going to be able to do what Hassan Reddick was able to do. But I don't think they're going to be counting on Nolan Smith to fill that void. You know, you're looking at Nolan Smith, a guy who was effectively, and we talked about this last week, guys like Josh Sweat in their first season in the NFL for the Eagles. Josh Sweat, I mean Nolan Smith last year effectively redshirting just like Josh Sweat his rookie year, except towards the end of the year, Nolan Smith started to get some playing time, but he was effectively redshirted his rookie year. So I mean, I think they're gonna go from now because the way the Eagles defensive line has always worked, there's always been your two main edge rushers and then your two guys behind them who rotate in and out. So I think Nolan Smith is going to go from basically redshirting to being one of the guys who rotates in and out, with your two main guys being Josh Sweat and Bryce Huff. Now, Bryce Huff, I mean, yeah, he had 10 sacks last year, but he's no Hassan Reddick. Without a doubt, he's no Hassan Reddick. He's not even close. Josh Sweat, he's great, but he's not even close. So I think it's mainly going to be Josh Sweat and Bryce Huff with Brandon Graham and Nolan Smith rotating in and out. It's not going to be nearly as good as if Hassan Reddick was on the defensive line.
Right,
It's
this
just not.
takes you from having one of the best pass rushing rotations to now you're just middle of the pack, middle tier.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, yeah, exactly. You have and all you have on that D line effectively is one guy who you just got who is coming off a career year and we're not even sure if he can replicate it. Because I mean that came out of nowhere. You have another guy who was a Pro Bowler a couple years ago. Although if I remember right, I think Josh Sweat had one Pro Bowl appearance and then his 2022 season. I think he was a Pro Bowler. I could be wrong on this, but off the top of my head, I think he was a Pro Bowler in 2021. But then his 2022 season was even better, but he didn't make the Pro Bowl. I think that's correct, but don't fully quote me on that. So you kind of have like a, sort of a Pro Bowl character level player in Josh Sweat, but not like a top end talent like Hassan Reddick was. And then you have a washed up, I don't want to say washed up because that sounds kind of rude, but a past his prime version of Brandon Graham. And
Who I
then
think
you,
still fits more inside too. I think that's where they might go with him as a pass rushing like defense, more of defensive tackle looks for him this year because I don't think his edge contain is what it once was. So that might even
yeah,
be removing him from the situation unless they really give Milton Williams a bigger role and maybe he can play a little bit outside too because he's quick and agile. Not the fastest in the world, but like a Hassan Reddick, but somebody that could possibly see more snaps outside if they did want to go that route.
yeah. So, I mean, look, bottom line is the trade sucks. It's a rare L from Howie, but it's not a good
I
trade.
just think he overthought it, and, his thinking was that he wanted to get some compensation back even though he woulda got a compensatory pick if Hassan Reddick moved on, but he wanted to get some compensation back as soon as possible for a situation that he think couldn't be rectified, but he coulda just opened up the checkbook, but also, maybe that meant that Hassan Reddick wanted a gigantic, like close to top tier um, contract extension to put him as one of the highest paid pass rushers. And if it was actually up from 15 million to like 10 plus million and $25 million range, it kind of makes sense why it didn't get rectified. But could have just forced him to play it out, and he had to play out and have a good season because he would have been on the last year of his deal. So he would have played hard. And like I said, picked up on the compensatory pick. But I just hope this doesn't lead to them drafting a guy, a middle tier guy in the draft with this first overall pick, even though I think now they might spend one of those top 3 picks with the 2 second-round picks or even trade up for a guy, because this is the first year I can remember in the draft that defensive players aren't really anywhere near as valued as the offensive players at the top of the draft. So somebody might fall down in the draft and they might make a move there, but there's still some other question marks. And now this leaves a bigger question mark with all the question marks on the defense and the way that you try to plug holes and put tape on it with some certain signings that we have liked so far, that we've agreed upon on our last podcast that we liked so far. Now you take the best defensive player away from your team.
Yeah, there's really just not. I'm the kind of person I always look for the silver linings and things. There just isn't one here. Because that's the thing. I mean, like, if you don't end up extending Haason Reddick, I mean, 1 year of Haason Reddick has a lot more value than that third round pick, you know? So it's just not even worth it at that point. You're better off just keeping him for the year. It just wasn't good. But let's move on. Now to the fight in Phils, because you know yesterday, as of yesterday, this was a bad weekend in Philly sports, right? You had the Phillies got blown out the first 2 games in the series. The Sixers lost the second game in a row where it came down to the very end and they lost. And the Eagles, of course, as we had just mentioned, traded Haason Reddick. So up until today, up until the Phillies played today, because of course the Sixers game hadn't happened yet. So up until the Phillies game today at 1:30 against the Atlanta Braves, it was a very, very bad weekend in Philly sports. Oh yeah, and didn't the I don't keep up with the Flyers too much, but they lost as well.
Yeah, they lost an overtime game. I forget when that was. I was watching that game
Yeah.
versus the
But yeah, so
Rangers.
it was a very, very bad weekend in Philly sports up until this game, which it wasn't even a great game most of the time. It started off Ranger Suarez came out of the gates, gave up 2 runs to start the game. Um, but after he finished the inning, I kind of got the feeling he was ready to settle in after that, and he did for the most part. He kind of finished with a pretty strong outing. Kyle Schwarber, hit that leadoff home run in the first inning. I was at the game, by the way. It was so being at the ballpark and witnessing that first Schwarber bomb of the season was pretty cool. Um, but yeah, so there was a lot of times during that game that they were down, and up until that big inning, where Alec Boehm delivered to give the Phillies the lead, and then they were able to close it out from there. So a great bounce back by the Phillies today, to avoid getting swept, to get that win against the Braves, get the first win of the season.
Yeah, it was a tough start to the weekend. I mean, they could have won game one. They got a phenomenal performance from Zach Wheeler, and then things crumbled in the seventh and eighth inning. Just absolutely blew the doors open. And for everybody that was saying the Phillies had the number one bullpen in the league, I think that changed a lot of opinions then. One thing I wanted to mention today, Jose Alvarado was in the ninth inning and cleaned things up. Do you think that's the way that the rotation is going to go? Because it's looked like so far through the bullpen that Jeff Hoffman's going to be the seventh inning guy. They're going to try and get their starters stretched over 6 innings. Maybe that changes. Like Zach Wheeler didn't have to get pulled that early in game one, but it made sense of being the first game of the year, and they're just being a little weary of the durability. How do you see the bullpen rotation clearing out?
First, what I would like to address is that whole MLB.com ranking with the Phillies rated as the number one bullpen. I mean that pisses me off even more now because when I saw that I'm like, us number one bullpen. First of all, we didn't have the best bullpen in baseball last year. We didn't even have a top five bullpen in baseball last year. We lost the NLCS because of our bullpen. Then in the offseason, we don't add to it at all. So how are we just magically the best bullpen in baseball? And what pisses me off about it is throughout Philly sports, rarely do people get the proper recognition that they deserve. Very rarely. I would say maybe with the exception of Bryce Harper. And so for like us to like actually get recognition for something, but it's not even something we deserve. It's just something so random, like us having the best bullpen. It's like, why is this what you choose to finally give us credit for? Something that we shouldn't even be getting credit for. I am like at this point, I'm almost convinced they did it just to piss us off, just so that we could look at that Philly's best bullpen in baseball, watch the season start, watch how awful the bullpen is, and then just get pissed off. I'm almost convinced because there's no other reason you would rate us the best bullpen in baseball. It doesn't make logical sense other than you wanted to piss us off. So I want to get that off my chest.
I just don't know how
First
we
and
got rid of the
foremost.
best bullpen when we didn't even know which specific roles were meant out to be.
Yeah,
Like,
you don't
think
even
that
know
it's
who's
like a
going to be
set
the
you think it
closer.
would be like a rotation that's been together for a long period of time, and, this
Exactly.
is like a collection of guys that, are just coming together besides, like, Jose Alvarado and Sir Anthony, who have been there for a little bit of time, but yeah,
Yeah,
that's what they
it's just
rated.
nonsense. It's nonsense. But anyhow, to answer your question now, I liked what they did today. Sir Anthony in the seventh, Soto in the eighth, or well, no, Soto came in for one pitch in the eighth, actually. Um,
I thought they went didn't they go Hoffman today in the 7th?
yeah, I think that's what happened. Yeah, because I remember they got into trouble in the eighth inning. That's when they gave up the run. And then there was a runner on third, 2 outs. So they brought Soto in, first pitch, fly ball out to end the inning. Um, and that was the only time we've seen Soto this weekend, if I'm not mistaken. I I'm not fully sure because the first two games I eventually turned them off because it just became unwatchable. But yeah, it might have been. I know Sir Anthony. I'm pretty sure it was in the seventh. I do remember seeing Sir Anthony. I think it was the seventh. Maybe they brought on Hoffman for the eighth, and then they put Solo in at the end there. But I do like the idea. Even with that being said, I do like the idea of Sir Anthony, Soto, Alvarado. I'm not fully sold on Hoffman yet. He's shown flashes, especially last year. He showed
You like
some
Jose
flashes.
you like Jose though, as the
Oh,
save.
absolutely.
Yeah, I do
Absolutely.
too.
I love Jose as the closer. As much as down as I am on this bullpen, I absolutely love Jose Alvarado as the closer. I mean, to be able to throw 99, 100-mile-an-hour sinker up in the zone, it's just lethal. Um, not to
Well, the thing
mention that.
is, we can't overreact to this because one, we're playing against probably the most talented offense in the entire league and one of the most talented teams in the entire league that hit what 300 home runs last year, so they can open up the floodgates at any point. And also, it's the beginning of the year. The only thing that is
Yeah.
troubling is there's going to be 159 games to make up for this performance over the weekend from the bullpen, but this is a team that you're going to see down the line in crucial moments. So hopefully these just aren't something that reappear come October. You know what I mean?
Well,
So
I
that's
will
the
tell
one
you the
thing.
one thing that is worrying, and that is a man by the name of Johan Rojas. I know it's only been 3 games. I know he batted 302 last year. I know I talked him up on the podcast
You
last
did.
week, but he doesn't. He did 3 games and not one single hit. He got hit. He got hit by a pitch today. and was able to get on base. But other than that, he doesn't have a single hit. He hasn't really looked great
The
at the
thing about
plate.
him is I'm willing for him to get on base by any means. Like, I don't need him to hit the highest percentage because of the defense that he adds. Him hitting like sub 200, like 220, I won't be okay with anything under 220. But if he can hit around 220 and get on base in other ways by drawing walks and getting hit by pitches, that's a plus because he doesn't clog up the bases. He's actually really fast and provides a lot as a base runner. But I just don't see him as an everyday center fielder. And Brandon Marsh also has 6 at bats on the season, and he has 5 strikeouts and the 1 lone home run. So their platoon of outfielders isn't looking the greatest right now, but it's interesting that they played Whit Merrifield 2 out of the 3 days so far.
Yeah, so it
Start the
seems
season.
like that's what's going to be the move is when they have to face a left-hander to play, then they'll play with Merrifield in the outfield. It seems like that's going to be the strategy moving forward, which I don't hate at all. I
And they
I would
pitch hit
like to
Bryson today as well, so there wasn't any issues with Bryson, but he, played for him, and they had Edmundo Sosa. Obviously, Bryce Harper didn't play today, so that was a huge key in the cog, but, they got the, victory, so
Yeah, well, I will tell you this from being at the game when Bryson Stott came in to pitch hit, I mean that crowd got electric. We were happy to see Bryson Stott come out. But then the one thing that sucks, if at first they pinched hit Bryson Stott and then they brought out Brandon Marsh, but then the Braves when Brandon Marsh came in to pitch hit, then they made the call to the bullpen and brought in a left-hander to face him. So that kind of sucked because it was like, all right, right-handers on the mound. Let's send in Marsh, but then they just
yeah, they just
went to
matched
the
it.
bullpen for a left-hander. So it was kind of like a waste of bringing Brandon Marsh out into the game. But you know what? I like Wiswit so far. He's looking good so far to start the season. Uh, I'm just trying to think. Other players who have looked bad or good to start the year thus far. I mean, Schwarber just looks like his usual self. Um, what Merrifield's looking good.
I mean, one of the reasons why they lost game 1 after Zach Wheeler pitched so well was because they went, what, 0 for 14 at the top of their order with, their
Yeah.
main 3 to 4 guys, so JT was
Well,
batting cleanup. How do you feel about JT batting cleanup?
that's actually who I was about to get to is JT Realmuto. As much as I love him and how great he's been as a Philadelphia Philly, I think he's just past his prime at this point. Maybe not defensively. I think maybe a little bit defensively. His arm sometimes doesn't look as accurate as it used to be, and just what he's been able to do with the bat in his hands the past. I mean, last year it wasn't the same. The year before that, it wasn't for most of the year, but then you really turned it up at the end of the year. Last year it wasn't the same, and this year he just doesn't look that great to start off. To have him at cleanup, I don't know how I feel about that.
What's
I
the
think he's a
solution
little
to that,
past
though?
his
Do you go
prime.
back to Castellanos at, cleanup? Do you put Bohm
No,
at cleanup?
that's the thing. I don't really want Costi at cleanup. I don't really want Bohm at cleanup. Harper needs to be batting third. I think
That's what I'm
like
saying, you're not
as
gonna mismatch that at the top of the order.
that's the
Schwarber with no
problem. That's
strikeouts and that low batting average in the 4 hole would not be, good, and I think they would have already moved Schwarber from leadoff if they didn't like him there, so
yeah. I mean, there really doesn't seem to be like a great option for the
Johan
cleanup.
Rojas?
Oh yeah, yeah, that's a good idea.
Put him in the
That's
cleanup? Nah. Yeah,
yeah.
there isn't, like, a clear
He did
option.
get jacked. He did get jacked, so
I think the, only options you would really have if you move JT off of, cleanup with which I don't think is a, dead set thing and something that they could, change the lineup with, but I think the only options would be Bohm or Castellanos. They had Castellanos batting, like, 7th, I think, day 1, and today he was batting, like, 6th, so he's moving a little up in the order and changing a little bit, so, um But I don't
Yeah, I
think any of
don't
these
think
lineups are
they.
dead set. They were kind of trying to play a little strategic versus the Braves. And I don't know if they were really testing lineups with the way that they've substituted players and having Whit Merrifield play the 2 games out of 3 in the series. I don't know if they were doing that just to get a feel for how he could
I think it was
specifically
just the
match up with the
lefties.
Braves.
I think it was just the lefty thing. I mean, that's something Rob Thompson
Yeah, they
has
still don't
been
want
big
Marshy
on.
to even really get at bats versus lefties. They just
I
still
think
are
it's
just trying
time.
to.
I think it's time. Like, come on, man. You know what I mean? Like,
You can't have the training wheels on half of your outfield. You know what I mean, or more than half
yeah,
your
like
outfield.
this is now since the resurgence of Brandon Marsh, and what I mean by that is when he came to the Phillies, we fixed his swing and he's been a good hitter. Since the resurgence of Brandon Marsh, this is his, you can say, his third season now, right? His second full season. I mean, why are we still holding him back? He's proven himself. It's time to just let him hit against lefties. I can understand, like, if sometimes, if you have a lefty pitcher on the mound, you put Whit Merrifield in there for him, or maybe it's the fact that you have a guy like Whit Merrifield, so you're trying to find a bigger role for him. But
I think they're
you know,
still missing a position player though, even with Merrifield. If they're still probably going to add maybe an outfielder at the deadline, or if someone comes up available in trade. That's why I was surprised that they obviously made a lot of signings from within with the 2 pitchers, the contract extensions they gave them. But I thought they could have added more position players because really off the bench, if you're having Whit Merrifield play different positions, you could have pinch hitters and ready to go. But in a crucial situation, if they come playoff time, they still can't make up their mind on whether it's Marsh and Rojas being your outfielders, and you even substitute Merrifield in. I think you can get away with Brandon Marsh starting in center, but now your bench is what? You have Edmundo Sosa, and then nothing behind it that you
you
can
know what's
trust in.
funny is outside of Whit Merrifield and Edmundo Sosa, I can't I can't tell you with full confidence who else is on that bench. Cody Clemens? Is he on the bench or is he
I
in the
think he
minor
went down to
leagues?
he went to the minor leagues.
Yeah, he might have.
Yeah, Christian Pache, obviously.
Oh, right, yeah, Pache. Yeah, of course.
Pache, that would be
Cave
the
is
one.
gone. Oh, Garrett Stubbs, obviously the backup catcher. So is that it then? Is it just Pache, Merrifield, Stubbs, and
Sosa.
Sosa?
Yeah.
Because I can't think of who else would even be on the bench. Huh.
Well, I mean, if you want to technically consider the designated hitter Kyle Schwarber, then that would be another
Well, no,
person.
yeah, but no, you can't consider that. The DH is part of the everyday lineup. Anyway, though, yeah, we're gonna we're gonna have to wrap things up here now, though.
Yes, sir. You
Unless,
want to give them your meatball of the week?
oh my God, yeah, meatball of the week. This is just going right off the dome, but this week's meatball of the week is Rashee Rice of the Kansas City Chiefs. And like I said, I'm just going off the dome, so I'm pretty sure what he got into a car accident, right? Is that what it was?
I'm not
That
sure.
was
I
the
haven't even
fast.
heard of this Rasheed Rice noise that you're about to preach. So
Yeah, I got. You know what? I got at least. Look at. Actually, now that I say, like, whatever
you
he
might
did.
be the meatball of the week for trying to claim Rasheed Rice as the meatball of the week and not
Yeah,
having
here we
your match.
go. Here we go. Yeah, Rashee Rice. The police are currently looking for Rashee Rice for crashing his Lamborghini while racing. And oh yeah, he caused a 6 vehicle accident. So there
A
we go.
six
Because
vehicle
the way
accident.
I phrased it at first, I said meatball of the week for getting into a car accident. That sounds horrible. That's not the
Yeah, I
way I
was about
meant
to
to
say
phrase
that
it.
sounds like
Yeah.
there must be more to the
No.
story here.
So yeah, so Dallas police say 2 drivers in a Corvette and Lamborghini were racing when they crashed, causing a 6 vehicle accident. Both drivers ran. A call sheet we obtained lists Kansas City Chiefs Rashee Rice as the suspected Corvette driver.
Man,
That is reading off of Twitter from at Kelly X Smith.
they
So
finally drafted a good receiver to Kansas City after getting rid of Tyreek Hill, and that's what happens. But they'll find a way. Everybody has them mocked for taking Xavier Worthy anyway. They signed Hollywood Brown, so Patrick Mahomes is the standard around here. So I don't think they'll miss a beat if he does that for whatever
yeah,
reason.
it
Face
seems like
disciplinary
Pat
action.
Mahomes is able to be successful with just whatever receivers you give him, honestly. I hate to say it, but he's just too good. But yeah, Rasheed Rice, you're the meatball of the week. And you know what? Since he was in town, this may have happened 2 years ago, but Marcelo Zuna, you're the meatball of the week too for that DOI you got 2 years ago, maybe 3 years ago. I don't know, but you're also the meatball of the week just because. So that's gonna wrap it up. Thank you guys for tuning in and be on the lookout for another podcast next week as well.
Yes, sir. We'll be back.